What's going on, everybody? It's Ron Brown, LMT, the People's Fitness Professional, alongside my co-host,
Mikey Fever.
and this is a New Yorker's Perspective. We're here right now with Norris, right? That's what we're gonna call you today.
Norris
We're not gonna say
Francis,
Turtle Gang. Somebody said, "Yo, the Turtle Gang, dude." Yo, I know that, brother. But yeah, so Norris, we got the brother Norris in the building today. We want to talk about indigenous culture, where his history, what Turtle Gang is, what is the Turtle Island, and let's start off with that. Let's first start off with your name and where you're from, your foundation.
Okay, so let me start with a traditional greeting. Let me say Kwinganao Lonwa, Nindashinzi Ila Takwa. Nawalotamin Wanda Takwa. Ninon Giai Lenape King or Shiekbi. Okay, so basically I just told you my name, introduced myself. As my traditional name is War Turtle. I let you know the territory I'm from, which is Lenape Hill King, more specifically Shiekbi. And I told you we follow the ways of the Turtle clan. So that's there's a lot more I could have added to it, you know what I mean? But I just wanted to give you a basic greeting, you know what I mean? That would be a traditional greeting. So this would be something that anytime we're amongst other Lenape, other groups, you know what I mean, you want to be able to introduce yourself with the traditional greeting, which is as close to what our ancestors would have been doing, how they would have been introducing ourselves. Now it varies, some are, you know what I mean, but that's just a basic greeting. Gives you the location, gives the families, we can go into even more depth and give the families we come from, but it's a basic identifies your community, the location, and what totem or clan you would follow. So my people are from a place called Monmouth County, New Jersey, and that is what would be considered Unami territory. It's the borderline of the Unami territory and Muncie. So Lenape are broken up into three, I don't want to say clans, but it's more or less clans or political groups, if you want to look at it from that perspective. Muncie, the Unami, and the Unatalachigo. So the Muncie would be the northern branch, and their totem would be the wolf. The Unami would be the more central branch, considered to be the oldest, and they would be the turtle. And the southern group would be the turkey. So that translates in our government to the three branches of government, things like that. So it's some of the foundations of government that you can find from, they tell you about the Iroquois, the Treaty of Peace, the Iroquois, what's it called? The peace. I forgot what.
The Iroquois Confederation.
Yeah, well, you have the Iroquois Confederation, but they have like a declaration of peace that people speak about like it's the law. You know what I'm saying? And it's kind of a misrepresentation of what it represents, but it does play a part of it. But there's another component to it, which is where we draw from the three branches of government, and that comes directly from the Lenape tradition and how we govern ourselves. You know what I'm saying? And that would be the turtle is the oldest of the clans in terms of governance, and they would be the ones who would be in hereditary seats of rule. So when you hear a lot about Turtle Clan, Turtle Island, this is in reference to our creation myth. Right. So the Turtle Island reference, like scientists or let's say the general public will look at the shape of North America and think that's what Turtle Island is referencing. You know what I mean? But it's really referencing our creation myth, which deals with it's basically a myth that we use to express creation. You know what I'm saying? It's I'm not sure if you're familiar with anthropomorphication, which represents it's a
animals represent
yeah.
through like they. I get a concept represents to human beings characteristics.
Yes, to tell stories. Yeah. So our creation myth is more that than a literal sense of North America is shaped like a turtle. That's just kind of like a coincidental thing. So when we talk about creation myths, when we talk about Turtle Island, we're speaking of our creation myth and the role that the turtle played in our creation myth. You know what I'm saying? So that's a very long and extensive myth. I have a link here for you. I could give you the link if you want to go and read it for yourself, but we could actually do an entire show on the reading the myth. You know what I mean? So I don't want to get too involved in actually reading it, but I'll definitely give you the link. So yeah, when you hear Turtle Island, it's just a reference, and it's an Algonquin reference. So you'll hear a lot of people referencing it, and they're not of Algonquin nations. That's because they're kind of just picking it up generally through books. You know what I mean? There are other tribes that don't reference North America as Turtle Island. It's not a general thing that all tribes, you know what I mean? That comes directly from the Algonquin creation myth. So all the Algonquin nations would celebrate Turtle Island. And I'm sure other tribes that are closely related to us, you know, they might have adopted the myth, incorporated into their traditions, but it's primarily a Algonquin creation story. So you wouldn't have other tribes referencing Turtle Island. You know what I mean? So when you're trying to decipher if someone's coming from a real perspective, a real understanding, a lot of things like this is what someone who has a little more in-depth knowledge of the culture looks for. You know what I mean? To be able to understand the level of expression that the individual or the perspective that the individual is coming with. You know what I mean? So that's more or less what Turtle Island is about. It's our creation myth. It's not referencing the shape of North America. That's more of a mundane, like, you know, social media, mainstream concept, but it's far from what it represents in the actual traditions of our people. Because within that mythology is historical representation of the creation of nations, you know, I mean, man, everything is all wrapped up in it, but it's written in a way where, you know, makes it mythology. But if you understand what you're reading, you kind of can, you know, you can put it all together. You know what I'm saying? But it takes having a traditional understanding of what you're reading. Like, just to read it now, it sounds like a kid's fairy tale. You know what I mean? But to understand what each animal represents, you know what I mean? You could really study it if you just like take each animal and represent and like study what the animal does. You know what I mean? Its purpose. And then you'll start to understand the myth as it unfolds to you. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Now, you know, great breakdown. Now, I want to talk about your history, where you come from, your history in the community. And I just want to let everyone know, I do know this brother. We met in the physical.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
absolutely.
It's some years ago, probably what, 10 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, it's probably around, I would say 2015, 16. I remember that's the last time we might have, like, I know we actually did a couple, we like did some work together, I believe. I did believe we did some filming with a sister, or you introduced me to a sister that I might have did some filming with. I know a couple occasions that we interacted, but the last time was at the Jadakiss video shoot in Harlem. That's the last time. I think that was about 2016.
Oh, wow. Wow.
But we've had other situations that we actually, like I said, we're actually on some type of shoot together, or you were
that was on
introducing me to somebody.
It was on 116th Street.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we go way back. You know, you're one of the first people I kind of met in the community. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, you had good energy, so we kind of linked up for a few things, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, you're definitely one of the first faces that I came across when I started to heavily, you know, run in what you call a conscious community. You know what I mean? So definitely shout out to you and your longevity. And
Thank you,
people
sir.
should know that you definitely been, yeah, I mean, people should know you definitely been putting in work for a while. And you know, you're definitely a familiar face in what's going on out here in New York City. So salute to you.
Sir. Thank you, sir. Salute to you. Salute to you. So now, where are you from? I saw the universal flag on one of your flyers. So I'm assuming you come from the 5% Nation. And you know, what borough are you from? New York City? What borough? You know,
Okay.
let's talk about
So yeah, I'm from Jersey.
Jersey.
I'm from a town on the shore called Red Bank. You know what I mean? In our tradition, we call it Rulers Born. You know what I mean? So I'm an RBG Rule Born soldier. Now, obviously, when we talk about when we're talking about the neighborhood organizations that many of us might have joined, right, in our communities, right, depending on what was kind of controlling the streets. When I was growing up, the 5% Nation was the predominant organization in Jersey, where I'm from, right? In Harlem, Brooklyn, the Bronx, the places that me and my peers frequented, 5% Nation had, you know, was how we moved around, how we moved through the boroughs, how we moved through Jersey. You know what I mean? So I come from a community called Red Bank. We, you know, Rulers Born, got knowledge of self, 1991. And that was kind of late for my community. You know what I mean? Like I'll be the first to let you know. Most of the people in Red Bank got knowledge of self. They had knowledge of self by the time they was 12, 13 years old. You know what I'm saying? I got knowledge of self a little later. I think I was, you know, like 19 or so. But nonetheless, I grew up in the community, and, you know, like joining this aspect of the community is like committing to your brothers and your sisters in your community. You know what I'm saying? How the nation of gods and earth operating when I was young was, you know, you know, you had the positives and the negatives, you know what I'm saying? But the positives, in my eyes, outweighed a lot of the negative aspects, you know what I mean? What we learned, the discipline, you know what I'm saying? Our diets changed, you know what I mean? We were encouraged to study, you know what I mean? Not everybody else was engaging in the nightlife and all the, you know what I mean? The darker side of what was going on, but that's more of an economic hood thing, you know what I'm saying? So 5% Nation, what it did as a youth, it brought us together, gave us camaraderie, gave us lessons and rules that we could govern ourselves by that were greater than just our own personal beliefs, you know what I'm saying? So for me in my journey, being a part of the 5% Nation, the nation of gods and earths, taught me how to really refine myself, you know what I mean? How to navigate through this information and through the world, how to have a respect for myself and show that respect to other people. You know what I'm saying? That's what the nation of gods and earths did for me. Now, do I continue to follow the doctrine? No, I don't. Have I taken the best parts from it and moved on? Yes, I have. And that's what the lessons even tell us. You know what I'm saying? So I took the best parts of what I got from the 5% Nation, from the nation of gods and earths. I always consider myself a 5%er. This 5% is the 5% of the population that tells the truth freely. So irregardless if I follow the nation of gods and earth doctrine, I'll always be a 5%er. You know what I mean? And I'll show and prove for anything I ever say, because that's what the 5% taught me. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, a lot of people might try to misconstrue it like, oh, he thought he was this. Nah, that was a course of study that we engaged in as youth to help us navigate not just through our communities, but through the greater world that we was engaged in. Because at that point in time, we coming from a place where we think we less than, you know what I mean, human. You know what I'm saying? So that raised our vibration and taught us to think highly of ourselves and be able to have conversations intellectually with our teachers, with the clergy in our communities, you know what I'm saying, with other nationalities, other races, you know what I mean? And it gave us a voice, you know what I mean? So that empowerment is what allowed me to move through the next journey in my life, which was, reclaiming our identity as a family and having ourselves absorbed back into the tribal communities to the point where now we participate in, and we have a voice within the community. So that's what the 5% was for me. It was a sharpening tool that, like I said, I still carry those principles with me because I stand on righteousness. You know what I'm saying?
Indeed. So now I want to go into these questions about, names, labels, etc. Right. And I know you've been around the Moors for a long period of time as well. So I would like to know the difference between what you represent and the Moorish nationality movement and the Indian Native American movement.
So when we talk about, the Moorish American movement from, I feel like I've spent a lot of time studying with Temple Moors as well as, whatever you want to label Moors that aren't with temples, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to be offensive to anybody. I've listened to both sides. I focused on what Noble Drew Ali was teaching, what he was doing, the organization that he brought to the community. And what I know of the Moorish Science Temple, the Moorish American movement, it was a way to organize the people, raise their vibrations, introduce them to politics and law so they could be better citizens, within this United States. So within that, that's not something that's based on inheritance, birthright. When I say that, I mean, it's not a nation you're born into in terms of when we talk about national rights and laws, right? It represents a human right, right? And within the Moorish Science Temple, you might have people from different actual nations that are a part of that organization, which was based on religious protections and rights, right? And that goes back to something we talked about before called the Monmouth Patent, which was one of the first agreements between the indigenous populations of North America and the settlers, right? 1655 Monmouth Patent, which allowed Europeans to settle in a place called Monmouth County, New Jersey, which is where I'm from. Exact place, you know what I'm saying? This is the group of people that brought in the first slaves, you know what I'm saying? Some of the first of what we know of as the foundation. When we talk about foundational people, like, this is that, whether they black or white, these are foundational Americans. You know what I'm saying? Because these people aren't even American at the time. There isn't no America. You know what I mean? But they're European settlers who made agreements to live amongst the Indians, right? That's the Monmouth Patent. It's considered to be the oldest agreement that allows Europeans to actually live amongst the Indians, right? The communities that rose out of that are the Monmouth County communities. The families that rose out of that at this point now are families that have been amalgamated and mixed. So you're going to have some of these original European settlers whose offspring at some point intermarried with Indians, whose offspring at some point intermarried with Africans. And you have multiple communities in Monmouth County that spring from that. And those communities, some of them kept their tradition, their native tradition. So even though they're amalgamated people, when you enter into a town or to a community, you're going to adopt the community's traditions. So even though people married in, they became a part of that community and adopted the tribal traditions. And this is how communities like mine lasted. You know what I'm saying? My ancestors were on what was considered the first Indian reservation in United States history. That's different from colonial history. We're talking about after the incorporation of the United States. So the first Native American Indian reservation is in Brotherton, New Jersey. And my ancestors, the Sandhill Band, Lenape, and Cherokee, along with Narragansetts, Shinnecock, Nanticoke, and other groups of Indians who all were coming to New Jersey because New Jersey had a better relationship with the Indians. Okay, so this is where you have groups like the Lenape, who are an actual Virginia group of Indians, but they're now in New Jersey. This is how you have a town like Piscataway in New Jersey, which is named after a group of Lenape from Virginia. See what I'm saying? So on this reservation were certain groups and certain families. Two of my lines were on that. That would be the Reeves and the Richardsons. The Reeves and the Richardsons left Brotherton and settled in a place back in Monmouth County, in the very part of the lands that were the original patents, right? And families were able to buy back property, you know what I'm saying, and kind of reinsert themselves in lands that was once their ancestors. And places like Pine Brook, New Jersey rose up, Reevytown, New Jersey rose up. Later on, the Sandhill community, which is a subgroup of the Reevytown group that moved from Reevytown to Neptune, New Jersey, and became known as the Sandhill Band of Lenape and Cherokee. You know what I mean? But that was just one group of the larger family. You know what I'm saying? So the one group, which would be the Sandhill, kind of rose to prominence because they still carried the traditions, where the other family members were blending in, you know what I mean, assimilating. But those family members that assimilated still were connected to their traditional relatives. And this is where you'll have people talking about, yeah, we used to go to powwows. You know what I mean? It was probably one of your other family lines that kept the tradition, and you was going to be with your cousins. You know what I mean? This is a lot of what we grew up doing. You know what I mean? So we didn't grow up in a direct line that carried the tradition, but our other lines carried it. And if a point in time comes where you decide that's what you want to follow, you go seek it out from the lines that still carry it. You know what I'm saying? And
I have
that's
a question.
kind of, yeah.
Before you go any further, are these tribes, these nations are recognized by the state of New Jersey, like they honor them like a proclamation and such?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the thing about when you deal with federally recognized. Are you familiar with the process of like incorporating towns?
No, if you could elaborate on that, I appreciate that.
So let's say you and 10 other friends bought some land and y'all all created your own little community, right? As that community grew, right? Once you get to a certain number, a town or village becomes a town. You know what I'm saying? Like all these things are based on population and what type of regulations, and you know what I mean, like a borough, a city,
ordinances and stuff like that.
Yeah, different ordinance. So when you grow to a large enough size, you can become you can incorporate into the local municipalities, and now your community is now officially a part of whatever borough or you're in. But prior to that, you were there, but you weren't your own, you weren't incorporated. You understand? So when we talk about federally recognized tribes, these are tribes that are incorporated into the United States. So the tribes that aren't federally recognized doesn't mean they don't exist. It means they're not incorporated, so they're not funded by the United States. And if the United States don't fund you, they have no business or reason to have any interaction with you. So when we say, are you recognized? You're asking, is your nation incorporated? Now, I'm not saying that to throw any shade on any nations that are. I'm just trying to give the layman a better understanding of what it means for tribes that are not registered. I mean, federally recognized. It doesn't mean you don't exist. It doesn't mean that they don't know who you are. It just means they don't have any business contracts with you, right? See what I'm saying? That's simple. Now, how can I show and prove this? I can show you this by the Monmouth patent. I can show you this by various treaties, various agreements that the state of New Jersey has with our tribe.
Gotcha.
See, we predate New Jersey. See what I'm saying? So on some levels, to ask someone you predate for recognition is to show you don't know who you are.
Gotcha. Understood. Gotcha.
Right? You get that? So for certain nations on the East Coast who are first contact tribes, right? Those of us who are left behind, because the ones that removed made agreements. And I'm not here to slander those other nations. You know what I'm saying? There was a time in my life when I was much more immature and didn't understand everything, and I would have done that. You know what I mean? But I'm past that at this point, and I have a better understanding of the politics, right? So those of us who stayed behind, we grew over time to get to a point, just how I say a village could grow into a city, could grow into a borough. Well, the ones who stayed behind over the past 200-300 years have repopulated to the point where they're their own nations. But they still have the same ties to these first contact stories as the ones that left.
All right. So
see,
yeah, carry on.
But so because we don't have direct contact with the United States, what many of us have done is we have created our own confederations, and now we deal with things on an international level. So we don't deal with the United States as a subordinate to them. We deal with them as an equal. See, and we do that through international law. And this is why we access the UN, because we're not building relationships with the United States. We're building relationships with foreign nations in Africa, primarily because many of us on the East Coast are what? African. Mixed with African. So doesn't it make sense to create relationships with those people who can possibly fund the things we want to do for ourselves? Because all recognition means is incorporation and funding.
I got you, definitely.
So if we can get our funding other places, we don't need to sit with the United States, and they know who we are, so they can't interfere.
As they say, jurisdiction, they don't have that control of what you can.
Yeah, exactly. So it's in our best interest in the big picture, right, to not be federally or state recognized. It may be more difficult for us as we build ourselves up, but in the long run, that's how we maintain our sovereignty. See what I'm saying? Sovereign, like a lot of people like, yeah, we a sovereign nation. We just ain't got no bread. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the difference. See what I'm saying? So once we put ourselves in a position to be able to create our economy, right? And because of who we are and where we are, right? That economy can be based on a multitude of things. This is America. See what I'm saying? We can get bread off of many ventures.
Exactly.
That funds our nation. See what I'm saying? We just now have to use our creative abilities to create these avenues. So now we can fund our own nation, whether it be through television, music,
right,
sports. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
If one of my kids makes it to the NBA, I'm on him like Yao Ming in China. Before y'all even talk to him, you got to hit his people off with 50 mil. Ain't that what China did to the NBA just for talking to Yao Ming? And then within that, they created agreements with the NBA that you got to invest into China. We're leveraging our resources, which is the people. Yao Ming was one of their resources.
That's a fact.
You know what I'm saying? Now, when we start to understand that we're nations within nations, right, which is what Noble Drawley was trying to teach us, right? And we can, what do you say? Cling to your own vine and all that. This is what he's talking about is what we're doing. What he created was what I see as a place for those who haven't identified their nations yet to have a place to organize, right? So when the time comes that they realize, oh, I'm this, now they can be a part of that. And now these two organizations can piggyback and That's how we should be moving. You know what I mean? So anybody that's a part of the Moorish Science Temple, right, which teaches nationality, you should still be, to me, seeking out your true nationality, which ties into a nation that has historical records and roots. See, my nation has a history that predates anything incorporated. My nation has a history that predates any of this, and that's what we stand on. You know what I mean? And that's what gives us our rights internationally. You know what I'm saying? You may not see it when we walk in the streets, but as a nation, we're not treated that way. It's just we haven't built ourselves up enough to where others can see it like that. You know what I'm saying? And there's a lot of other nations up and down the East Coast, Canada, and South America that are engaging in politics in this way. You know what I'm saying? So
can you name some we could possibly, check out? Or
well, what you would have to do is, we belong to a confederation called FANA, Federation of Aboriginal Nations of the Americas, right? It's a federation that spans Canada, North America, and South America. We just recently, a year ago, and we have an event coming up in August in Rhode Island, right? It's a placement event, basically, but it's created to bring African nations together with our nations so we can sit and start talking about what we can do to assist each other in growth. You know what I'm saying? So that's what we're doing as FANA. So if you want to look up FANA, the Federation of Aboriginal Nations of the Americas, everything that we're engaging in is displayed on the website. Everything that we're about, the nations that are a part of this. Just a year ago, we signed a treaty with the Garifuna of South America. You know what I mean? So they're nation members with us. You know what I mean? There's a lot of other nations, the Narragansetts of Rhode Island. Who else? I'm sorry, I can't. But if you go on the website, it'll all be there. You know what I mean? That's organization that we're doing within ourselves. We're not asking nobody for permission. You know what I mean? But at the same time, we're not declaring war and we want to shut shit down. No, we just want to properly represent ourselves. You know what I'm saying? And then we'll take our chances from there internationally. We don't have to destroy nothing. We don't have to tear nothing down. We just have to properly represent ourselves as the indigenous nations we are. You know what I'm saying? And that's what the nation and the groups and the organizations that I'm attached to, that's what we're doing. This is why we're in the UN, you know what I mean, creating relationships with nations from all over the world.
Yeah, I see it.
You know?
Europeans, from what I know about Europeans and the Native American community, they're kind of like, I guess, intermarried and things like that. Is it the same thing with this initiative here?
What do you mean? So this is the thing, like, people at this point in North America, we're all intermixed. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm sure you have a level of Native ancestry in your background if you did some type of genealogical look. I'm not telling you an Indian. Stop believing what you believe. I'm saying that you probably have some percentage of, you know what I mean? We all have some percentage. I mean, be the smallest amount. You know what I mean? We could speculate how it got there, or you could do the research and find out exactly how it got there. Now, through my family history, what I know, like, I'll give you an example. We know the story of the Mayflower, right?
Yeah.
Do you know the number of people that came over on the Mayflower?
No.
Okay, so it was somewhere like 100, certain amount of families, right? Within the first year of them being here, half the women died because of the journey. See what I'm saying? Because of natural issues, they died. Who do you think these men took as wives?
Gotcha.
See what I'm saying? Now, is that conquering? Is that some sinister plan to take over? That comes later in 1776. They have a whole thing called the Revolutionary War that we could focus on that. But up until then, these Europeans that were coming here were fleeing persecution. And if you think they were coming over here to now persecute people, I can show you when that all happened. That all came later, right? That all came with agreements that were happening. But when these people first came here, many of them were fleeing bondage. How do I know? Yeah, religion, exactly. How do I know? Because one of the main families that was on the Mayflower, right? Some of the oldest families is a family called Stillwells, the Stillwells. You're familiar with Coney Island, right? Stillwell Avenue.
Yep.
Right? That was founded by the Stillwells. The initial settlement in Brooklyn is Gravesend, right? That was settled by the Stillwells, right? Yep. I am a distant descendant of Stillwells. See what I'm saying? Like, I got that in my ancestry. We have a record of one of the ancestors. Now, this is a European man. They were, his daughter was they were here in Massachusetts or whatever, and they were being, because you still had there still was feuding amongst the people who were coming here, because you had the zealots, you know what I mean, the religious zealots fighting against the people who were just basic religious. You know what I mean? What's the two groups? You had the Pilgrims and the what was the group that was the Protestants? Yeah, you had the two, and they were basically the same people. One was just a little more of religious zealots. You know what I'm saying? And they fought amongst each other, right? So there's an account where a father received notice that his daughter was sick and dying. So, and we have the handwritten accounts, right? My cousin has these accounts. He gets on a boat to come to the Americas to be with her. Halfway there, he realizes it was just a ploy to get him back to the Americas. So he writes his daughter a note telling her, by the time you get this note, I would have been hung. But blah, blah. And we have the note. You know what I mean? So this is the stuff that was going on amongst them. They was fighting amongst each other for religious reasons. It's a lot more going on. They were not in no position to be bullying no Indians when they first got here. You know what I'm saying? I'm talking about the settlers, not when the armies came. That's different. So when we talk about were they mixing in, they were mixing in for survival. Absolutely. You know what I'm saying? And by the time the 16 and 1700s came, you had whole generations of Indians that were already mixed. Now, what the question we need to be asking is, what was their political, you know what I'm saying, preference? Did they follow in the ways of their father or the ways of their mother? That's the question you got to ask. Just because they have a European parent don't mean nothing. See what I'm saying? It's many cases that will show you, like, so I have a relative, I have an ancestor, I don't know if his name is Diwali Bowles, Chief Bowles out of Texas, right? They're Cherokee out of North Carolina. Chief Diwali Bowles' father was an Irishman. That Irishman was killed by 3 white men. Chief Diwali Bowles, at the age 13, avenged his father's death and then had to flee. And that's how he ended up into Texas and became this great leader. You know what I mean? But this is a Indian boy whose father is Irish, who exacted revenge for the death of his Irish father. Like, we got to remove the way we see race now, right? It wasn't that back then. It was, what nation do you belong to?
Right.
See what I'm saying? And what agreements does your nation have with this nation? It wasn't the color of our skin. So to insert those concepts is to cheat yourself out of actual history, because what you'll come to find out when you really understand this history, you're going to find out that many of us received our Indian blood through our mixed ancestors. Meaning the white people married Indians, and then the offspring of those people married Negroes.
That's a fact. Well, you know, it's great that you say that, because online, as you probably seen this, people tend to weaponize that whole DNA concept of indigenous and such, which doesn't make any sense. Because I always say that, as you mentioned, it was a mixture of a lot of people back then. You know, and that was happening through migration and everything. And you know, when Negroes and indigenous, as they put them, were mixing together.
Absolutely.
Like all of California is like that. Got parts of
Mhm.
California. You mentioned Jersey, Virginia, as we know, parts of Long Island and New York. There's a lot of
Yep. Yeah.
reservations out there. Yeah.
Absolutely. And what people don't realize is that we're all connected. We're family. Like this, like my community is relatives with all the communities here, and we have a deep history that go back to colonization, to reservations, right? To communities that we all were a part of.
Now I want to ask you this. Now, don't mean to cut your wisdom. Now, so you said that we're all family, pretty much, right? We're all we're all
When I say we, I'm talking about those of us who have identified to be a part of these communities. I can't speak for everybody else. I'm saying we, as in Shinnecock, my group, Lenape, the Narragansett, the Shinnecock, the Montauk, they're all one family group.
well,
Literally.
I'm speaking in terms of bloodline.
Yeah, they're all bloodlines. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So, I mean, even those who don't have that knowledge of self to say, okay, I am this,
Mhm.
indigenous person, right? If you will, for lack
Yeah.
of a better term, right? So DNA wise, we would be considered all family, right? Because we are here in North America. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, what I'm saying, like DNA has nothing to do with it. DNA is like DNA is DNA is being exploited, right? DNA has been introduced to the people to make it seem like that is how you can get into your tribe. Don't no tribe accept no DNA. Like you can't go to nobody with DNA. You have to go with them and say, I'm connected to this ancestor who was on your rolls. And if you're not a part of that. So I have relatives that removed. Their lines are on rolls. I can't partake in that. Because my line, I don't have a direct descendant that's a part of that, even though he's my uncle. Lineage, direct line. That's who inheritance comes from. I don't get my inheritance from my uncle. We all know this, right? So when people are talking about, you might have found your cousin on there, but this is politics. And when you're talking about Dawes rolls, those are not Indian rolls. Those are United States rolls. So they determine the rules for those. So all those people that are on those rolls, like how are you mad because you say a white person signed on to United States roll? That white person would have never been able to fake regular Indian roll because you know what these are? These are actually just family records. If we stop thinking of Indians as Indians and think of them as families, you'll have a better understanding of what we're talking about. Because we generalize it like it's just, no, these are families. And if you're saying you're a part of that family, somebody gonna want to see the connection. That's simple. I don't know what else to tell people. It's not we're all this. Yeah, you might be my cousin, but when my father passes away, you don't get none of this inheritance. And we're not going to blur the lines. We know this anywhere else. Why is it that we all of a sudden are confused when it comes to this? You know what I'm saying? Like
so how would you say someone should find out where their family line comes from, or where do they fit in this equation?
I would say use DNA to inform yourself, right? And then it's way simpler than people think, right? First of all, you got to follow where the information takes you. You can't go there thinking this is what you're looking for. People go looking for their Indian ancestor. Go look for your ancestors, right? And follow what you see. If your purpose is to tie yourself back into a native nation and you find that ancestor that you're directly in alignment with, now you could use the DNA or whatever to find relatives, right? Show those people your connection and allow those people to walk you through the process instead of showing up or finding something on something and then thinking you can email a nation and be like, how do I sign up? Where's my, you know what I mean? No, these are families, not corporate. Like, even though they have been placed in corporate jurisdiction, at the end of the day, when you strip all that away, it's still families. It's still somebody's grandmother you trying to attach yourself to.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Not just your grandmother, somebody else's. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to have more information than you. That's why you're in the position you're in. You know what I'm saying? So I suggest anybody who feels, because this is also a spiritual thing. It's not like genetically, you see who I am, right? But I'm spiritually connected to something else that genetically doesn't look like this. You understand? And that's because of those genetics are in me. They may not be reflected in my phenotype, how they would have been hundreds of years ago, but that responsibility is in me, not just on me, right? So when you discover your responsibilities and you're called to that, the best thing is to find out how you fit in and where you belong. Find out, are you cousin or are you grandson? See what I'm saying? Because all these things are going to inform you of what your position is within that community, right? And then bring something to the table. Don't come asking, what can my nation do for me? What can you do for your nation? Be of some value when you step back into yourself. You know what I mean? When I step back into my nation, I also brought a level of value in the form of the videography I do, you know what I mean? And the relationships I already had created via, you know, my journey. You know what I'm saying? So look at Kyrie Irving. Once they found out who Kyrie's family, what? Oh yeah, we need you. You know what I'm saying? And we could say, oh, they only accepted him because he got money. Yeah, that's a part of it. But they only accepted him because he's blood. See what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. He couldn't have gotten if he wasn't blood. It just so happened to be he's Kyrie, and it's a no-brainer. You know what I mean? But he could have did the same thing without his NBA money because he's really the blood. And it don't matter what these people think. It don't matter if half of them are racist. None of that matters when you deal with tradition.
Right? Now, let me ask you. So the Dawes roles,
mm-hmm.
you would say aren't valid?
No, what I would say is they are not yours. Okay. They are roles that you signed because you agreed to remove and receive payment for moving. Mm-hmm. So that's their list of who they have an agreement with. It's not something that Indians said, ooh, let's put ourselves on this list. Each nation, every nation has its own role, which is just a record of its citizens. Where you live has a role, a record of its citizens. That's different than if some corporation came and said, y'all want to go to such and such? Sign up. But you got to prove you're a citizen of Harlem because we're only offering this to citizens of Harlem. Mm-hmm. See what I'm saying? And now you as a citizen of Harlem is signing up to a role that somebody created to, see what I'm saying? It's valid, but it's not, it's like people be going to it like it's proof of Indians, of you're an Indian. It's proof that you interacted with the United States and agreed to remove. You could have been a Negro. You could have been, you know what I mean? You could have been a Negro citizen of a nation. You know what I'm saying? You could have been an Indian that don't agree, but because that's what the greater politics of your group says, you got to go. You see what I'm saying? It's not, everybody is learning this history from the European perspective. So they know about Dawes roles, but they don't know about that each tribe has its own roles that would have predated Dawes roles. My people have our own roles that say which families are a part of our roles, you know what I mean? That go back to forever. You know what I'm saying? Like I have articles of my 4th-time great-grandfather bringing the first colored physician in Red Bank our tribal roles, because these are the people that he has to service at the hospital, because people of color couldn't use white doctors. So you could use the hospital, but you had to have a black physician meet you there. So this is why I tell people, if you start looking up the first black physicians in wherever you're from, if you want to start getting to the bottom of things, that person was put in position because of certain rights that were being afforded to people of color. And they had to, you know what I'm saying? So you're going to find these records, and those black physicians 9 times out of 10 have, if there was a tribe in the area that was going through this process, right? He's going to have their roles, because at some point, because we're moving into more modern times and they got hospitals, you might need to go to the hospital at some point. You know what I'm saying? Like, they got guns by now, people shooting each other, all types of things going on. You know what I'm saying? So, but these are real simple things that you can look into in history and start to coordinate yourself. You know what I mean? To say, okay, boom, I never, let me go look at some of these first doctors, you know what I mean, and see what their patient list looks like, and find out about the history of the area through the patient list of this first colored doctor. See what I'm saying? These are where you're going to find your answers. You're not going to find them necessarily on the census. The census is another United States document. They write what they want in there. So if you're going in there looking for your answers, you're only going to find their perception of you, which might be a Negro, and you might not be Negro. See what I'm saying? We're looking at everything from their perception and forgetting it's their perception. That's why we got to get to our own stuff. And for us to think we didn't have our own stuff is foolish. You know what I'm saying? We had our own stuff. They tell you they burnt it. But if you think your people kept valuable information in one place, you really don't know your people. You know what I'm saying? You're not giving them the credit for everything they accomplished. And they're the ones that laid the foundation to everything that we, you know what I'm saying? Like, these are the real foundational Americans. They're not just black. Actually, they're probably what you would call mixed. You know what I'm saying? Who you think was getting things done? Like, this whole perception we have of America is such a limited one that when you start sharing the real truth, it sounds bizarre, but this is where the truths lie. It don't lie. That's when they say his history, his story. Yeah, that is true. You know what I'm saying? His story ain't so far off, but you need your own story to be able to compare the two. And then you need to be able to validate your own story, right? Like, a oral truth is not just you say it. A oral truth is this, that, and the third, and I can show you. You know what I mean? Oral tradition, like if we think of just a recipe, right? You can have the recipe. Yeah, you can have the recipe in your head and say, oh, it's an oral tradition. Make it, and then when we taste it, we like, nah, you ain't got the recipe. Like, because the proof is in the pudding. See what I'm saying? So when we talk about oral traditions, there's always proof in the pudding. It ain't just because somebody said it. See what I'm saying? But if you don't know that aspect of it, you just know oral traditions are where our burial grounds are. And that's information we only pass on orally. But guess what? You can go verify it if you have the information, because I can take you there. So that's the validation of the tradition. See what I'm saying? So, like I said, a lot of the concepts that we deal with are of foreign perspectives. We still think with a colonized mind. And that's why we are thinking that DNA could prove something that will override what a family says about itself. You know what I'm saying? Like, it can help, but when you deal with tradition, that's based on things that are carved in stone. You know what I mean? And uniquely accessible and visible to the people. It's a part of the culture.
Right. Right. So now, so you're saying the first black doctors or physicians in whatever area you, I guess, research to find out where your family comes from?
I'm saying it could yield information. What it will do is yield information on the foundational families of color in these territories.
Okay.
Right? It'll let you know if they come. Because so let me if I could share something with you, I'll pull it up. Hold on. So some of the first physicians in my territory in Red Bank was the Parker family, James Parker and his father, right? Find this interview that he did. So they did an interview and he talks about his education, his background, and they asked him about, some odd things that he would talk about, like some things that people might not know about. And he talked about an old country town called Pine Brook, where it was a community that was based on Native Americans and runaway slaves who came through the Underground Railroad, right? And he talks about how he was brought. Okay, here it is. Can I share this with you?
Yes, sir. Let's see.
Yeah. Okay, so you see that? All right. So, hold up.
From our viewers on Spotify and Apple and all those other streaming platforms, you got to go to the YouTube to see the documentation. Peace.
Yep. And don't forget to comment, share, like, subscribe, engage, super chats. Peace.
So this is a interview in June 23rd, 2000. June West, who is actually a family member. The West are family members as well. So you see, is a practicing physician in Red Bank. Hello, Dr. Parker. Hello, blah, blah. It's a nice long interview. This is over here. You'll see Count Basie. He's one of our Red Bank alumni. But he's going to talk about how he was delivered roles by old man, Peter Rock. And that is my fourth great-grandfather. So wow. He says, so he's talking about Reevy. He says, so he asks, what is Reevy Town or where is it? It's a country town out between Eatontown and Asbury Park, west of Asbury Park and east of Eatontown, out in the country. You might know this, but Pine Brook was an underground railroad station. Pine Brook was founded by escaped slaves who mingled with the Sandhill Indians and with the families that I grew up with and residents of whom I still treat. Those are the people Mahalia taught. Mahalia Fields subsequently married a Reverend Atchison, and there was a beautiful school on Sycamore Avenue in Tinton Falls named after Mahalia Atchison. I went to that school for 1 year. How did Reevy Town get its name? From a family of Reevies. What's the family connected to the Underground Railroad? Part of it. They settled out there, and the large family of Reevies was scattered all over Monmouth County at the present time. There are Reevies in Fairhaven, Reevies in Eatontown, the Richardsons, the McGuires, Dalhomos, the Berries, and all of these people were descendants of escaped slaves. The Church of Reevy Town was started by the people who lived out there, and it was first called, in fact, Reevy Town. Pine Brook was originally called Macedonia. Macedonia AME Zion Church was established, but interestingly enough, before it was established, they used to have preachers come by horseback on Sundays to preach to the residents out there. And I had the original log of that church. It was given to me by a man by the name of Peter Rock. Now, the Rocks were settled out in that area. Mr. Rock was the first black printer in Monmouth County. He was the son of old man Peter, who was the son of a slave. That's Abraham. Abraham was a slave and that's my seventh great-grandfather. Abraham was a slave on the Fleming plantation, which became Flemington, New Jersey. So I just wanted to share that a little, read that to you. So that's an example of exactly what I'm talking about. Dr. Parker, who is the doctor I went to all my life, he knew more about me than I knew about myself. You know what I'm saying? And when I'm going there to get my Pop Warner checkups and whatever's going on, because this was back in the day when you really had a town doctor and everybody went to Dr. Parker. You know what I'm saying? You walk in there, he know exactly who you are. As soon as you walk in, know your mother, all that, know your history. You know what I'm saying? This is a man where if I'd had the wherewithal to think, Dr. Parker, who my people? Exactly, he could have told me. You know what I'm saying? So when I'm talking about doing research, a lot of this information is not going to be where like you go into all these places that actually were designed to hide your actual ancestry. You know what I'm saying? And when I say hide it, I don't mean in the sense that they're hiding because they want to remove. There was no need for them to reference your history because you are now a citizen of the United States. See what I'm saying? Like if you're on those documents, it's because you're a citizen, which means your affiliation to your nation you've traded that in. So we're looking for all these documents to show us who we are, and they're all of European or foreign creation, and they're not supposed to tell you who you are. So it's not that they're hiding it from you. These documents that you're looking for your information on were never designed to hold such information. You know what I mean? Now, some of your ancestors may have been belligerent and stood on it. So you're going to find some people who find these people being identified as such. You know what I mean? But for the most part, those were not our documents. They would come, look at us, and write what they want. You know what I mean? We weren't submitting them things. And for further reference, when it comes to this, the 2020 census was the first census that people had a 200 spaces to properly identify who they are. You know what I mean? Not just African American, whatever. You could write down all your ancestry. That is something that was created by the lobbying of FANA, who had direct meetings with the United States Census Bureau. I filmed it. You know what I mean? We sat down with them people and we discussed the issue that people of color are having when they look on their census records, and how one year they're labeled Negro, next year it's Black, it's this, it's that. And we let them know that that is a problem, because some of these people were misclassified from Indian to Negro. You know what I'm saying? And that is because that's the perspective of the United States, because they created the one drop rule. So irregardless if you're in your community seen as not an Indian, you're a member of that community. What community is it? It's Sandhill. Who are the Sandhills? They're Indians. You get it? So I don't identify as an Indian. I identify as a Sandhill, who are a group of families. And historically, we have been referenced as Indian. See what I'm saying? So irregardless of what my genetic makeup is, I'm born into a family who are traditionally of the Indian tradition. So it's not for them to tell me I'm not that. See what I'm saying? But if now on their records, what are we doing? We're giving them jurisdiction. You know what I'm saying? So they'll say they changed our status. No, your only status is United States citizen. What they changed is your identifier. How do they distinguish between the citizens? Is he a Negro? Is he white? Is he mixed? Is he an Indian? But the only status is citizen, right? When people say they changed their they changed my status, I bet you they didn't change your social security number, because that reflects your status.
Right.
You can change your name, but your social security won't change. The only way you can change your status is if you give up your citizenship to the United States. There is no other status. The president of the United States is a citizen, just like me and you. He's not a greater citizen or a lesser citizen. You know what I'm saying? He's a citizen. That's what affords him the right to run for president. You know what I'm saying? The other terms that we see are called identifiers, and those are used to distinguish between the different communities, right? And when the census takes your records, they want to know which community they're catering to. Just like they want to know how many elderly people are in your community, because they need to know how many ramps they need to be building in businesses, and they need to know how to better cater the community to the people in the community, right? So when we start using the census to organize ourselves, and now a whole community realizes who they are, and now this community identifies themselves on the census as this said group of Indians, now the census these people are self-identifying as this. Now we have to take them into consideration as being a unique community that has its own needs. See what I'm saying? And now they have to cater to the needs of the community because you have so many people that's a part of this community. And you have a voice and you're organized, right? So what we did as Fauna was we created a way for people to quietly start correcting what they believe to be their status, but it's really their national identity and their descent, right? Because your status is citizen, can't change that. But your identity, your national descent means, oh, these are all Irish. How you think Chinatown ended up with Chinatown? Because they all identify as a specific people.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So now they have representation for their people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we're not all black. We're all different people who could be described as black, but we have very unique communities and unique identities that need to be addressed. See what I'm saying? So when we all collectively identify as black, they give the money that's supposed to be going to our communities to the black leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We need to identify our own leaders, and we need to be creating communities and organizations that empower our own leaders, which is what Noble Drew Ali was doing, which is why I have respect for what Noble Drew Ali did. You know what I mean? What it came to be and how people perverted it and you know what I mean, manipulated it, that's something else. But what he was doing was setting up a way for people who might not have known their exact nationality, but putting them in a position, a political position, to be able to have some more control over their destiny. You know what I'm saying? So that's what we are moving towards. You know what I mean? Not disruption, but inclusion on a political level where we are equals, not subjects. And that's what nationality and organization and all these things are supposed to be for. If you can't organize on a national level, meaning via your identity, you can organize on common agendas. You know what I'm saying? Things that really benefit the community. And then you can organize in a way where you can, you know, look at the LBGT community and all that. You know what I'm saying? That's based on what? Common traditions that they have. It's not based on a nationality, but they organized and they got powerful, just like Black Lives Matter. You know what I mean? So we need to have organizations in our communities that are working with the indigenous nations, that are working with the political parties, and we need to be all at the table so we can further our own agendas. You know what I'm saying? And that's what we're doing. And we're trying to erase the idea that it's this general Indian thing. No, Indian is just a term that was placed on communities. Who are those communities? They're not Indians. That's just a label placed on them. See what I'm saying? We got to start identifying ourselves as not descriptions or labels, but actual people who have historic continuity.
Right. Now, before we close out, of course, I want to have you on the show again because you know, you have a lot of information and work you put in for years, and we were talking about us actually taking footage of these communities and going there and
Oh, absolutely.
capturing that capturing that experience. Before we close out, I want to talk about or ask, besides the first Black doctor in or physician in whatever particular area you come from, there are also other files or roles people can go and take a look at. Do you know of any?
Okay, so I would me personally, I would look into like the basics is finding like deeds, things like that, birth certificates, that's the basic stuff. But anything that is centered around organization, community organization, you're gonna want to look into those places. So primarily, yeah, your churches, like we can't run away from our churches. Like our churches is where we were organized as people. And like, so I'll give you an example. My people were Episcopalians. So you'll see AME Zion, right? Mm-hmm. African Methodist Episcopalian. African Methodist that's one denomination. Episcopalian is a whole nother denomination, right? What are they saying to you? What does that say to you? AME Zion, right? Mm-hmm. If you have an African Methodist and Episcopalians, these are groups that are coming together to protect themselves under religious rights. See what I'm saying? So my people, as Lenape, we dealt directly, like we had treaties eventually with Britain, right? So remember, this all started with what? Rome, right?
Mm-hmm.
Certain decrees that said we wasn't human if we didn't have certain religions, right? But who was Rome at war with for years? England.
Oh, yeah.
England. They subjugated England, right? So at this point in time, England is no longer under the Roman Catholic Church. They've created their own church. It's called the Anglican Church. So they're no longer under Rome. They don't deal with Rome, right? Which is why when the British came to North America, the East, Northeast, they entered into treaty because they weren't moving based on the papal bulls. They were moving based on international rights. So that's why you have all the agreements. The British are coming. All these things were dealing with agreements that England had with the indigenous nations here. See what I'm saying? Now, my people, we were some of the first Christian Indians, right? But to strengthen our relationship with England, as opposed to Rome, who's doing what they're doing, we took on their religion. But it's really just like saying, that's my crew. See what I'm saying? We're going to come under this religious right for protection, for allyship, for a stronger bond. So you're going to find Episcopalian churches all up and down the East Coast. You're going to find these underground railroads are AME Zion. Why? Because the Indians were helping these Africans escape. These underground railroads are Native American trails. Like, this is not something that, see what I'm saying? Like, the Negroes were being helped because there was not a time when Black Africans and Natives were not working together. As soon as they got away, they ran right to who else they gonna run to? See what I'm saying? Like, this is just what was going on. There's many accounts in South Carolina of whole villages of free Negroes going back to the 1500s because they ran off plantations. You know what I'm saying? Out here, you ever heard of the Pavonia Massacre?
Yeah.
It's the massacre that happened in Jersey City. Well, in retaliation to the Pavonia Massacre, the Indians went and wiped out mad plantations in North Jersey. Those slaves disappeared with the Indians. So we're talking the 1650s, 1670s. You got whole groups of Africans being freed from different wars that were taking place that people don't even talk about, you know what I mean, that predate so many. Like, we think things started with William Penn. It's mad shit that went on before William Penn that they don't talk about, you know what I mean? But this is when a lot of these Africans were being absorbed into some of these tribal nations early on, all up and down the East Coast, to the point where by the 1700s come, you got whole tribes that appear to be Negroes. But they've been around for almost 100 years now. See what I'm saying? It's not like that's what they always was. And this is what people are starting to mistake when they're looking at images of people and they're going, those aren't the real ones. Y'all don't know the history. And you're trying to assert something without knowing the actual history. There's never been a time when people of color didn't work together. You're not going to find that anywhere unless they were two rival groups directly at war. You know what I'm saying? But there's no way you can't run through my neighborhood and need assistance, and people in my neighborhood that look just like you, look similar enough to you, that can sympathize with you, are not going to help. And when you're dealing with native people, you're dealing with people who are still living traditional lifestyles. When they came over here, they considered the Indians to be in the Stone Age. but they don't know. They're not telling you that they closer to the ancient ways. They make it seem like, oh, they ain't have the wheel. Nah, they were still in a pure spiritual. They were still on the mounds doing ceremony. See what I'm saying? They were still living the culture that had been wiped out in many places for thousands of years, right? So these are traditional people that are going to be honorable people. You know, we was taught, you know what the Lenape called the European when we first saw him?
What's that?
Called him Lenape because it means man. See, we the Lenny Lenape, which means the real man. But in our culture, how we see it, it's human, it's man. See what I'm saying? So we didn't see them in anything other than, like, their description is different, but that's man. You know, and I was taught that to see God in someone else is to see God in yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're not going to see, if you don't see the divinity in the man that's standing across from you, how you going to see it in yourself? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not saying you treat him like God, but you should still see him. He might be straight savage, but you still see God. You just got to deal with him like what he is, but you should be able to see that. You know what I'm saying? And afford that individual the opportunity to show and prove who they really are. You know what I'm saying? And this is what I'm talking about. When we saw these people, they was Lenape, just a different form of Lenape. You know what I'm saying? And did they eventually show that they not us? Yeah, absolutely. You know what I'm saying? But we have a tradition that, you know what I mean, that put us in an awkward position. But the point I'm trying to make is tradition, all these things, all these ills of society that we have now, there ain't no room for that when you're dealing with tradition. You know what I'm saying? It's mathematics. You know what I'm saying? It's that. It's the same thing. It's a written code that predate you and is bigger than you. And you either going to submit to it or you're not going to be a part of the community. That's what tradition is. And that's what we lack in our communities is tradition.
Indeed. So we're going to wrap this up. Thank you for coming out this evening, Brother Norris. We got to have you up again because I really want to take this and delve deep into this subject because this is extremely important for our people. You know, so I want to have you back on and discuss this once again. You know, I want to show you some stuff that I've learned about this subject, and we could go into and dive deep into it. Pause. Now, Mike, you had anything to say, Mike?
No, it was very informative. Like, you know, we gotta look into these societies, dig deep into the culture, and see that we have always been close to one another, so-called black and brown.
Absolutely.
You know
so let me say this just to before we leave. So West African nations are primarily matriarchal nations, right? So when these West Africans were fleeing and coming across these Native American nations that are matriarchal, matrilineal, they already knew the rules, bro. See what I'm saying? Because this is like two farmers running up on each other. They might not speak the same language, but they speak that same dirt language. They both know how to, see what I'm saying, interact with the earth. And that's the language they speak. So when you're talking about a people that's coming from a matriarchal society and they run into another people and they recognize the culture, it's that much easier to, you know what I mean? Because we communicate this way. When you got culture, you communicate in so many other ways.
For example, Hispaniola with the Tainos and the Africans, that's like the birth of voodoo from the island. But now they divided due to their oppressors, they have different mindsets, and now they're warring over nonsense.
Absolutely. And that's what they do with everything we do. That's why we having a conversation over hip hop now. Want to divide hip hop, and it's a healing medium that brought people together. And now we want to, you know what I mean? Like, but that's the nature of colonization.
Right.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's all it does. It divides us up so we can utilize us as resources, you know what I mean, and live off of our energy.
Exactly.
Indeed. Thanks for coming out this evening. Really appreciate you. Thanks for the chat. Sharif Anil Bey in the building as Peace Char in the building.
Peace to Sharif, my bro. Absolutely.
Awareness Daily. the twins, a New Yorker's perspective, and we're out.